why we require a complicated, specialized transport system in the first place. Why bother, right? It's so complicated. Now, one major reason why I'm not talking about humans right now. I'm not talking about mammals. I'm talking about generally any organism, right? Now, in any organism at all, we need the nutrition to be able to move from one place to another, right? In any organism, there is a need for transport of substances from one place to another, right? And one of the main ways substances can move in or out of cells is via diffusion, right? The molecules or the particles can go down the concentration gradient from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. That is what diffusion is. Now, when we go ahead and we talk about it, this is this is sufficient in single cellular organisms. So if we have a single organism, this is, good enough. This diffusion in and out of the cell is good enough, right? It will do its job. But when we move on to a larger organism, a multicellular organism, now we have a problem, right? Because we need to be able to carry those substances from cell to cell to cell. And the larger your complex is going to be, this is the harder it is going to end up getting, right? Now, first, let's talk about what happens in transport in small organisms. Let's first talk about transport in small organisms. Okay, so small organisms would be, your algae, your larvae, your insects, all of these would be considered to be small organisms. Now, when we're going to go ahead and talk about it, for a lot of small organisms like amoeba is a single cellular organism, or for, your larvae are multicellular, they're not single cellular, but they're extremely, extremely small in size, right? The nutrients and oxygen can directly diffuse in and out of the cells, right? It can diffuse in and out of the cells. Similarly, waste products can also diffuse out of the cells. And this works. This works. For a small organism, this is more than enough. Let's see why. Diffusion is sufficient for these reasons. There's certain reasons why diffusion is good enough. And these reasons you might think at the moment that they're obvious, but when we're going to talk about it in technical terms, you'll see that the technical terminology we're using is not that, it tends to be a bit confusing. So one first reason why in a small organism, and these reasons that I'm going to you, these reasons are also the reasons why diffusion is not enough for large organisms, why diffusion is not enough for you and me. It's not enough for, even for insects, it's not enough, right? So when we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about it, reason number one, the diffusion distance between the outermost surface and innermost surface is quite small. So the distance that the molecules or the particles have to travel as they diffuse from outer side to inner side, that distance is quite small. And later on, when I do the topic of, transport, cellular transport, you are going to see how the distance is really, really important when it comes to diffusion. So since the distance is really, really small, that diffusion can take place quickly. Second reason is the reason that you have to understand very clearly, because you will see some your MCQ questions on it, right? The second reason is that they have a large surface area to volume ratio. What's the surface area to volume ratio? This is what I wanted to go over with you. I'll go over that with you in just a second. Let me just tell you the third and last reason. The last reason is that the metabolic demands are low. Since the demands of small organisms metabolically are not that high, so they do not need to, worry about regulating their own temperature. They don't have to worry about using up too much oxygen. They don't need that much food. So diffusion is good enough. These are the reasons why for a lot of small organisms, its diffusion is good enough. Now, what is this? What is volume to surface area ratio? Surface area to volume ratio, sorry. Surface area to volume ratio, let me put 3 diagrams in front of you. I'm going to make 3 cubes. This is going to be slightly with a little bit of mathematics on it. So I hope it doesn't get confusing. I just want you to understand the concept of it. This is not something that you're expected to know, no, but I just expect you to understand the concept of what it is. I'm going to make 3 cubes. This is cube number 1. Then let's draw cube number 2. Cube number 2, I'm going to draw slightly smaller. And cube number 3 is going to be even smaller. I'm going to write down some numerical values. You don't have to worry about the calculation portion. This is mathematics that you do not need to know. It's just for clearing our concepts and making sure we understand very clearly what we are dealing with. Now, over here, let's say that this cube, all sides are 3 centimeter. Of this cube, all sides are 2 centimeter. And the smallest cube, all sides are 1 centimeter. We are going to take a look now. Technically speaking, let's start by talking about surface area. Surface area, how do we calculate it? We calculate the area of one side of the cube and we multiply it by the total sides. So this is cube, all sides are 3 centimeter. If I want to calculate the area of one side of the cube, so to calculate the area of one side of the cube, what are we going to go ahead and do? We are going to, this is one side of the cube. So I will simply, area of a square is going to be 3 centimeter to 3 centimeter, right? Area of a square is side into side. So I'm simply going to go ahead and I'm going to do 3 centimeter to 3 centimeter. Again, you don't have to worry about the calculation portion. I just want you to understand what do I mean by surface area to volume ratio. So 3 centimeter to 3 centimeter. Fine. So let's do the calculations. 3 3s are 9. So the area of one side is 9. We have total of 6 sides. So we can go ahead and multiply this by 6. This will give me the total surface area. which comes out to be 54. Now, let's continue. Let's calculate the surface area of the next one. If I calculate the surface area of the next one, so my surface area, again, I'm going to do 2 centimeter into 2 centimeter, right? So that's going to give me my area of one side. The area of one side comes out to be 4. There are 6 sides of the cube, so I'll multiply that by 6, which is going to give me my answer as 24. Right? Then finally, I have the smallest cube. So surface area of the smallest cube is actually going to be 1 into 1, which is going to give me 1. And then there's 6 sides, so I will get my answer as 6 centimeter. Now, one thing you're automatically going to notice, in terms of surface area, the surface area is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Now, you might be a bit confused right now because you might say, but I studied in chemistry as well as in biology, but especially in chemistry, I studied that the smaller the particle, the more surface area it has. That's what we had studied. Remember, you had studied that if you take a lump of metal and you take the same metal in a powder form, the powder will give you a faster rate of reaction. Why? Because there's more surface area. But if you take a look at it numerically, it doesn't make sense because the surface area seems to be decreasing. The small object actually has a smaller surface area, and the large object has a larger surface area. So what's happening? What's happening is this. I'm going to now calculate the volume of all three. Volume is going to be side into side into side. So we will do 3 into 3 into 3, which is going to give me 27. Let's repeat. 2 into 2 into 2, which gives me 8. And finally, what are we going to do? 1 into 1 into 1, which gives me a total of 1. To figure out the diffusion, we have to take a look at surface area to volume ratio, which means you will take our surface area and divide it by the volume. The surface area is 54 and the volume is 27, which means my ratio comes out to be 2. If I repeat that over here, if I calculate the surface area to volume ratio, so my surface area is 24, my volume is 8. If I calculate the ratio comes out to be 3. And finally, if I calculate the surface area to volume ratio over here, so this is 6 and the volume is 1, which will give me a ratio of 6. So, technically speaking, if you just look at surface area, a larger organism has a larger surface area. So, diffusion, technically speaking, should be faster. But if you consider the surface area to the volume, you will see that the ratio is quite small, right? So this blue box has a larger surface area for a smaller volume. This red box does have a larger surface area, but the volume of the box is also larger. So if you will actually go ahead and calculate the ratio of it, you will end up getting a much smaller value. So larger the value of what? Higher the value of your surface area to volume ratio, the faster the diffusion is going to be. So in small organisms, even though the surface area is quite small, but if you compare it to the volume of the object or the volume of the organism, the ratio turns out to be quite high. So this organism is actually going to have a faster diffusion rate. For a large organism that actually has a lower ratio of surface area to volume, the diffusion rate is actually quite slow, which is why for large organisms, diffusion is not a viable transport method. That's why one of the major reasons, we have other reasons, but one of the major reasons why we require a proper transport system in larger organisms. Making sense? Any confusion in the ratio part?
No, I understand the ratio. It's fine.
Correct. Okay, good. Next, they're saying that, so let's talk about why do we actually require a transport system, right? What are the different reasons that we require a transport system? So the reasons would include number one, that obviously I've just mentioned that we have a higher surface area to lower surface area to volume ratio. Then the distance that the substances have to travel are generally quite long. And finally, or not finally, actually, large organisms tend to be metabolically active, meaning that they have a lot of demand for a lot of oxygen, a lot of nutrition. So they have a lot of these demands, right? Which is why they require a proper complex system. So, what are the features of mass transport systems? What are the features of mass transport systems? Mass transport systems are the uh, transport systems that we see in generally all large animals, in especially in vertebrates. Okay, so a mass transport system have certain features. Feature number one, they have exchange surfaces to get materials in and out of transport system, right? So you need to have exchange surfaces that will actually get the material in and out of the transport system. Then, so something to help the material enter the transport system and leave the transport system. Now we have different of these exchange surfaces. In terms of oxygen, we have lungs that allow the oxygen to actually enter into the blood vessels. Then we have our intestines, which help in transport of nutrition into the blood vessels, right? Then we need a system of vessels to carry substances, right? Then we have to make sure that we have a way to make sure that the nutrients or the substances move in the right direction. We don't want the substances to be moving in the backwards direction or in the opposite direction. We want to make sure that they're all going to where they actually need to go. Then we a way to make sure that the transport is fast enough to meet the metabolic requirement of all the cells, because that's a problem, right? If the transport system is not fast enough, some of the cells will get the nutrition. By the time the nutrition reaches the other cells, they've already died. So it needs to be fast enough. It needs to have a suitable transport medium. So that in the case of us, it's blood, right? It's blood. And so these are the different requirements that we have. Now, so when we this is the features that you will see in most of your circulatory system. Now, when we talk about circulatory system, there are two types of circulatory system that you're generally going to see in your organisms, right? The two types are, one, we can have a single circulatory system, single circulation, and then we can have a double circulatory system. Let's go ahead and take a look at the difference between the two of them. A single circulation system generally involves the blood passing through the heart just once, right? So the blood is going to, now draw a diagram and I'll explain this to you as well, that in a single circulatory system, the blood passes through the heart just once through the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle is one complete heart activity. Okay. So the blood passes through the heart just once through the cardiac cycle. This is seen in simple vertebrates like fish, right? So fish would have would have a simple this is seen as simple vertebrates, like fish. So what actually happens? What actually happens is this, that the heart pumps deoxygenated blood to the gills. So gills are like the lungs of the fish, right? The blood will get oxygenated. The blood will continue to the rest of the body, transporting and supplying oxygen to all the cells. And then because now all the oxygen has been used up. So the deoxygenated blood returns back to the heart. So in the entire cycle, the blood passed through the heart only once. This is a single circulatory system, right? Now, what is a double circulatory system? Double circulatory system, when we're going to go ahead and talk about it. So in a double circulatory system, the blood passes through the heart twice. The blood passes through the heart twice in one cardiac cycle. How does that happen? How is the blood passing through the heart twice? So it passes through the heart twice like this. Deoxygenated blood is pumped by the heart to the lungs. So the heart has deoxygenated blood inside of it, right? The blood needs to be oxygenated. So it's going to be pumped by the heart to the lungs. The blood is oxygenated in the lungs and then it returns back to the heart. Can you see the difference? In a single circulatory system, the blood was going to the gills and then it would continue on. It wasn't coming back to the heart. It was continuing on towards the rest of the body. In a double circulatory system, the blood will be oxygenated by the lungs and then it's going to come back to the heart, right? It will return back to the heart. The heart will then pump oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. In mammals, we can divide this into two categories. Okay, we can have pulmonary circulation and we can have systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation is between the heart and lungs. So the circulation from the heart to the lungs and then also from the lungs back to the heart. That all those blood vessels, all of those circulatory system, we call it Pulmonary circulatory system. Pulmonary is the medical term we use for lungs. Everything related to lungs is known as pulmonary. So this is lung circulation, pulmonary circulation. Then we have systemic circulation. This is the circulation that we have between the heart and the rest of the body. So the circulation that exists between the heart and the rest of the body is going to be known as systemic circulation. So when we talk about, now let's talk about what are the advantages that a double circulatory system is going to offer to me compared to a single circulatory system. Why is it that our body is so complicated? Why? Why is it that we cannot have a simple circulatory system where the blood goes heart, lungs, back to the heart? Why does it need to go to the heart twice? There are certain advantages that are provided to us that a double circulatory system tells us. What are the advantages? Let's see. The advantages, number one, is that there is no mixing of the oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. There's no chance, right? There's no chance that the oxygenated blood and the deoxygenated blood is going to mix with each other. And why is that so important? This is important because I want to make sure that the amount of oxygen going to the cells is not affected. Because if the blood, oxygenated and deoxygenated blood is going to mix up, that's going to change the amount of total oxygen in the blood, and hence the amount of total oxygen going to the cells, right? Then another big advantage is that it allows the oxygen and the nutrients to be transported quickly at high pressure. This is what's important. This high pressure part is important. When the blood comes back to the heart pumps it again. That's the reason the heart is pumping again is because we want the heart will pump the blood with a lot of pressure. That pressure is going to ensure that the blood is able to travel as quick as possible. Not only that, it will allow the blood to travel against gravity. Where does the blood need to travel against gravity? From our heart to our brain, right? Anything above the heart is against gravity. So for that, the blood needs to be in high pressure. When the blood goes from heart to the lungs, it loses pressure. When it goes from the heart to the lungs, it actually loses pressure, right? It slows down. And we will study that. We will study about that later on. But the blood slows down. So by the time, if that blood was continuing on to the rest of the body, it would definitely not have sufficient pressure to either travel fast enough or to overcome gravity and travel into our head. So we need to make sure that it's at a high pressure. Hence, it return back to the it will return back to the heart, right? So these are the major advantages offered to us by a double circulatory system. Now, everything is clear so far, right? There's no confusion about anything?
No.
Okay, great. Now we have to go ahead and now let's talk about what do we need to talk about in this topic. I'm going to divide this topic into three. The first part of this topic is, just give me 1 second. So we are going to be dividing this into three portions. We're going to be talking about the components of the blood. So what is blood made up of? We're going to be talking about blood vessels, how the different types of blood vessels are structured, how do they work. And finally, we have to talk about the function of the heart itself. How does a heart work, right? So, what we are going to go ahead and do is that we're going to go ahead and actually start by talking about how the heart is going to be functioning. That's the first thing we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with. So, let's go ahead and start off by talking about the structure of the heart and how the heart is going to be working. For that, let's open up the diagram. Yeah, this is the heart that you and I have in front of us. First, let's just go over the structure of the heart, right? The different parts of the heart, and then we're going to take a look at how the heart actually functions. Now, so this is what happens. What happens is this. You see, this is the heart that is in front of me. Okay? Now, in this heart, first of all, let's talk about the chambers. The heart is divided into four chambers. Okay? The chambers that you see at the top of the heart, we call them atrium. The chambers located at the bottom of the heart are known as ventricles. Fine. So the heart is divided into four chambers. Think of it like four components or four containers inside the heart. Okay, there are four boxes or four containers inside the heart. The ones at the top are going to be known as the atriums. The one at the bottom are going to be known as our ventricles. So this is our atrium and this is our ventricle. Now, how are we going to figure out what is the left side of the heart and what is the right side of the heart? Remember this, the diagram is always opposite to you, right? So whatever is your right side in that diagram, that would be the left side. So this is the left side of the diagram. If you will actually take a look at yourself, you will see that this is actually your right side. But in the diagram, this is the left side, right? So, and what is your left side would be the right side. So based on this, we're going to go ahead and start our labeling. Now, the atrium that we see on the left side of the heart is going to go ahead and be known as the left atrium. The atrium we will see on right side of the heart is going to be known as right atrium. The ventricle that we're going to see on the left side of the heart is going to be known as the left ventricle. And the ventricle we will see on the right side of the heart is going to be known as right ventricle. I don't think that is labeled over here. Now, the heart is separated into two by a muscle that is known as septum of the heart. So the septum of the heart separates the heart into left side and right side. Now, inside the heart, we have something known as our valves or valves. What are the valves there for? Why do we need these valves, right? Where are the valves coming into action? The the valves are there to prevent the backflow of blood. Why do we even need the valves? Why do we need to worry about backflow? I will explain to you in just a second when I explain the heart cycle to you, the cardiac cycle to you. I will explain that to you. But for now, let's just learn the correct labeling. So, when we're going to talk about the correct labeling, we have the valves can be found between, there are two types of valves that we will find, generally speaking. We can find the valves between atrium and ventricle. The valves that we can find between atrium and ventricle, the general name for them is, we call them atrioventricular valves. Or if you want to use a short term, you can even call them AV valves. That's also completely correct. Now, so the general terminology of AV valve your valves is that exist between the atrium and the ventricle are known as atrioventricular valves or AV valves. Both are correct. Now, the AV valves will be on both the left side of the heart and right side of the heart. The AV valve that I'm going to see on the right side of the heart is known as tricuspid valve. The AV valve I will see on the right side is going to be known as the tricuspid valve. Why do we call it the tricuspid valve? The reason we are going to be calling it the tricuspid valve is because, just give me 1 second. The reason why we're going to be calling it the tricuspid valve is because of the fact that it's wrong. The reason we're going to be calling it the tricuspid valve is because the valve is made up of three flaps or three openings. Okay. The flaps or the openings are known as cusp. Okay. So when we're going to talk about it, we have valves between atrium and ventricle, which are known as atrioventricular valves. Now, the valves that you will see on the right side, the valves are sort of like, flaps. They're flaps that can open and they're flaps that can close. The flaps are generally, we use the term cusp. Okay, we don't call them flaps, we call them cusp. So the ventricle on the right side, so the atrium, the ventricle on the right side, the valve that we will find between them is known as tricuspid valve. Why? Because it has got three flaps or three cusps, right? Now, on the left side, the valve that you're going to find between the atrium and the ventricle is known as a bicuspid because it has got two flaps or two cusps. Now, in the exam, you have two ways of possibly labeling this. You can either go ahead and label them both as atrioventricular wave, or if you feel like being specific, you can name them bicuspid valve and tricuspid valve. Now, around the bicuspid and the tricuspid valve, we have tendinous cords. What are tendinous cords? Tendinous cords are simply these cords or these ropes. I don't say the term ropes in exam. This is just to explain. Ropes made of tendon. They're ropes made of tendon. What is their job? Their job is to help in opening and closing of the valves because the valves are just flaps. So you need that structure, you need that integrity, you need that support that the tendinous valve is going to give to help in maintaining the opening and closing of the valve. Now, so these are the valves that we will see between atrium and ventricle. We're also going to see valves between the blood vessels. The valves we will find in the blood vessels of the heart. In the blood vessel, or I should actually say the valves found between the blood vessel and the ventricle. These blood vessels are known as semilunar valves. Right? And these are the semilunar valves if you want to go ahead and see. This. Right? This is a semilunar valve. As you can see, this lower portion is my ventricle and this is the blood vessel. So between the blood vessel and the ventricle, right? Similarly, we will also have a semilunar valve in the aorta. Again, between the ventricle and the aorta. Now, when we're going to talk about it, the blood vessels themselves, what are their names and how do they actually work? First, let's go over their names. There are two blood vessels that are connected to the right atrium. Okay. The blood vessels that are connected to the right atrium are, we call them vena cava. Vena cava are going to bring deoxygenated blood to the heart. So once the blood has done its job, it will bring the deoxygenated blood back to heart. Now, there are two types of vena cava: inferior vena cava and superior vena cava. The inferior vena cava is going to bring the blood from the, or in fact, I should do this with glue, should bring the blood from the body, from the body that is below the heart. So your abdomen, your legs, your arms, all of that blood is going to be coming from the inferior vena cava. Superior vena cava will also bring the blood to the right atrium, but it's going to bring it from where? It's going to bring it from the head and neck region of the body. Okay, so inferior vena cava is going to bring it from the lower body, while in a superior vena cava will bring the blood back to the heart from head and neck. Right? Now, that is one blood vessel. The second blood vessel that we have is known as our pulmonary blood vessels. Okay? We have pulmonary vessels. We have two pulmonary vessels. The two pulmonary vessels that we have pulmonary artery and we have pulmonary vein. Pulmonary artery is going to be connected to the right atrium. Or I should say it's going to be connected to the right ventricle. But it's going to be on the right side of the heart, even though it says artery. But it's on the right side of the heart. Pulmonary vein is going to be attached to the left ventricle, or it's going to be found on the right side of the heart. Right? This is the pulmonary vein. Okay. This is, by the way, also the pulmonary vein. This is the left pulmonary vein. This is the right pulmonary vein. The left pulmonary vein is coming from the left side of the lung. The right pulmonary vein is coming from the right lung. So we have two lungs, right and left, right? So one vein for both the lungs. Then we also have our pulmonary artery. As you can see, the pulmonary artery is connected to what? It's connected to the right side of the heart. The pulmonary artery, again, we can have a left branch and a right branch. The left branch is going to be coming from the or going to the left lung, and the right branch is going to go to the right lung. Okay. Then finally, the final major structure that we have to study is that we have our aorta, right? Aorta. What is aorta? Aorta is the largest blood vessel in our body, and it carries blood to the body. From the heart to the entire body, the blood is going to be carried by who? It's going to be carried by the aorta, right? The aorta is the largest blood artery, and it is going to be connected to the left ventricle. Right? So this is how your heart is actually going to be working. And of course, this is the septum, which divides the heart into left and right and prevents the mixing of blood. Now, the last final thing that I want you to notice right now, I'm not going to talk about the explanation. We're going to study the explanation when we go over how the heart actually works. But the last final thing that I want to explain to you is that see this brown thing that you can see. This is known as cardiac muscle, right? Cardiac muscle is the cardiac muscle is the muscle of the heart that helps in contraction of the heart. Now, you will see that the muscle, you will see that the muscle around the left ventricle is quite thick, while the muscle around the thin ventricle is quite thin. There is a reason for that. There is a reason why the muscle around the left ventricle is so thick. There is a reason for that. That's a very important reason that you should know. What is the reason? Why is it that you see that the wall inside the left ventricle is so thick? The reason for that is because the left side has to pump blood to the entire body. The right ventricle only has to pump blood to the lungs. The right side only has to pump blood to the lungs. So it doesn't need to exert a lot of force. It doesn't need to exert a lot of pressure. The left side needs to pump blood to the entire body. So the blood needs to have higher pressure. Hence, the muscle needs to be thicker. So it can exert that force. So it can exert that high pressure. Making sense? All clear? We are understanding the structure of the heart. We understand all the different parts that are present inside the heart.
Yes, I'm already familiar with like the structure,
The
so
structure of the
it's
heart, great.
easier. Yeah.
That's great. Good. That's perfect. Okay. Then that's actually pretty great because in the next class, then we're going to stop it over here for today. And in our next class, then I'm going to go over the entire cardiac cycle with you. So again, maybe the cycle itself you might be familiar with, as in where the blood goes from where. That portion you might still be familiar with, but we actually need to talk about we need to go actually talk about the cardiac cycle with certain terminologies that I don't think you have gone over before, or at least you might have done in class, but you haven't covered in your, IGCSE. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to stop it over here for today, and we'll continue, inshallah, with the topic in the next class. All right.
Okay, thank you, Miss.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next class. Have a good day.
You too. Bye.